Some albums arrive with an identity, others arrive with silence. Tricky Zingers belongs to the second group. Released in 1975 by a band that never fully stepped into the spotlight, this album doesn't announce who it is or why you should care. There is no clear narrative, no manifesto, no moment where it demands attention. And yet, decades later, it still exists. Quietly, patiently, that alone makes it worth talking about. One of the most obscure things about Creme Soda is not how little information exists about them, but how little they tried to be understood. They didn't brand themselves. They didn't align with a scene. They didn't chase a sound that was already successful. They existed in a strange, in-between space. After the psychedelic era had peaked, but before nostalgia made it valuable, this placed them in a cultural blind spot. Creme Soda sounded like a band that assumed the music would speak on its own. It didn't. One of the most overlooked aspects of Tricky Zingers is how non-public it feels. This doesn't sound like an album made for performance. It doesn't feel designed for a room full of people. It feels closer to something recorded because the band wanted to capture a moment, not because they wanted to present one. Many collectors later described the album as having a private press sensibility, even though it wasn't strictly a homemade release. That feeling matters. It explains why the album doesn't project outward, it folds inward. Most records guide you. They pull you toward a core idea, a dominant emotion, a clear statement. Tricky Zingers doesn't do that. There is no emotional climax, no obvious center of gravity. Instead, the album maintains a consistent emotional distance. Not cold, not warm, neutral. This neutrality is one of its most misunderstood qualities. It's often mistaken for a lack of intent, but it's actually a refusal to manipulate. By the time Tricky Zingers appeared, the music industry had changed. Psychedelia was no longer exploratory. It had become stylized. Albums were expected to signal their purpose quickly. This one didn't. There was nothing here that radio needed. Nothing promoters could frame easily. Nothing critics could summarize in a sentence. So the album passed through its time without leaving a trace. Not because it failed, but because it didn't participate. What later listeners respond to is not the album's sound alone, but its behavior. It doesn't escalate. It doesn't resolve. It doesn't perform urgency. There's a sense that the band trusted the listener to meet the music halfway. That's rare, especially now when so much music is built to remove effort from listening. Tricky Zingers asks for nothing, and that becomes its strongest quality. Why this record survived at all? The most obscure part of Tricky Zingers is not in the music. It's in the fact that people kept it. Copies weren't destroyed. They weren't discarded en masse. They weren't forgotten completely. They sat on shelves, in collections, waiting. When people rediscovered the album, it wasn't because someone told them to. It was because the record felt oddly untouched by time. Creme Soda never became a story. There is no reunion narrative, no tragic ending, no rediscovery arc driven by the band itself. And that absence is important. It allows the album to exist without explanation, without mythology, just sound and time. Tricky Zingers doesn't reward impatience. It rewards presence. It doesn't want to be decoded. It wants to be allowed. And if you stayed with this video until the end, it's probably because you sense that. Not because the album promised something, but because it never did.